Hi everyone, welcome to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast, your daily audio summary of the latest news reported in the Ukrainian media. My name is Artem, and here is the news. For 484 days, Ukraine stands strong against the forces of the Russian invasion. In his evening video address, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy called for full deoccupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. He warned that anyone who turns a blind eye to Russia's occupation of such a facility, to Russia's mining of the territory and facilities of the nuclear power plant, is actually contributing not only to this Russian evil, but also to terror in general. Earlier, in a separate address, Zelenskyy said that Russia is probably preparing to commit a terrorist attack at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which could lead to a radiation leak. The president added that Ukraine is sharing all available information and evidence with partners in Europe, America, China, Brazil, India, the Arab world, and Africa. Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar informed that the offensive of the Ukrainian forces in the south of the country is seeing partial successes, reports Army FM. According to her, at the moment the Ukrainian troops are pushing the Russian occupiers back and leveling the contact line, in particular on the Melitopol and Berdyansk fronts. The Russians in turn are deploying and using their reserves, trying to regain control over lost positions, but still suffering great losses. Maliar added that in the east of Ukraine, the Ukrainian forces were conducting both defensive and offensive actions on the Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts. She stressed that the Russians had not advanced a single meter. We would really appreciate if you could rate us, ideally with 5 stars, and leave a glowing review in the apps where you are listening to this podcast: Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and others. This really helps more people to find the highlights from Ukraine and learn the truth about Russia's invasion. CNN informs that the first counteroffensive operations of Ukraine have less success than expected in the West, and Russian troops have shown more competence than was believed, reports European Pravda. According to one of CNN's interlocutors, Ukraine's counteroffensive does not live up to expectations on any of the fronts. He also explained that Russian defense lines were well fortified and the Russian troops successfully undermined Ukrainian armored vehicles with the help of rocket attacks and mines, as well as aviation. Instead, Ukrainian troops turned out to be vulnerable to minefields. In addition, Ukraine faced adverse weather conditions because vehicles had problems with passability. Meanwhile, CNN sources warned that the counteroffensive is still in its early stages, and the US and its allies remain optimistic that Ukrainian forces will eventually be able to liberate more territory. At the same time, in an interview with BBC, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that the counteroffensive by Ukrainian forces will be carried out in the same way as in autumn, when it seemed that the process had slowed down and then the armed forces began to advance rapidly. Russian occupation authorities of Crimea informed about an attack on a bridge on the administrative border between Kherson Oblast and the Crimea Peninsula near Chonhar yesterday night, reports Suspilne. Local authorities hope that they will be able to repair the bridge in a couple weeks, but for now other roads have to be used. Investigators from the media Ukrainska Pravda found out that the family of Yevgen Borisov, military commissar of Odessa, has purchased property and cars worth millions of dollars on the Spanish coast during the full-scale war. Records from the Spanish registry confirm this, although Borisov himself claims that he does not know whether his family has any property in Spain. As military commissar, Borisov is responsible for mobilization of people in the armed forces, as well as giving confirmations to people not fit for military service, using which they can travel abroad, while it is forbidden for Ukrainian men who are fit for service. The European Commission transferred another 1.5 billion euros tranche of macrofinancial assistance to Ukraine, reports LBUA. According to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, these funds will support Ukraine's state services and infrastructure in its courageous fight for freedom. Ukraine received the first tranche of macrofinancial aid from the EU in the amount of 3 billion euros in January, second tranche of 1.5 billion in March, and the third in April. Overall, the EU envisaged 18 billion euros for Ukraine in 2023. Thank you for listening to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast. We are a commercial initiative of just two people and we need your help to grow. Share information about the podcast, rate us in the app, subscribe to our Patreon. With your support, we are getting better. We call on you to demand from governments of your countries to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Russia and its citizens to stop their invasion of Ukraine.